Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Students of the Word. This is session number 74. And today we're going to be looking at the end of paragraph 12. I don't know that we'll get all the way through it because it's a long verse, as we mentioned last time at the very end. But we're going to see where all of these things sort of wind up together. And there are two operative verbs that I'm going to be really interested in looking at: knowing and hearing, both of which get emphasized there in that final sentence. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk for a minute about sort of a larger pattern. We were talking, jumping ahead anyway, not ahead, but back to paragraph 12. We were talking a little bit about the way in which John is clearly pointing to, but fairly vaguely, indirectly, pointing to the power that is in the world. And we can see this happening, and we can see the indirectness with which it's happening at several points in the paragraph. We get the, for instance, like every spirit, every breathing that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And remember how we talked about how, like, on the other side of that, we would expect, based on the way that John has done these kind of parallel statements to this point in the epistle, that he would have said every spirit that confesses Jesus is from somewhere else, like it's from the evil one or whatever. But it doesn't say who it's from. He just says it's not from God, right? And then adds, this is the spirit of the Antichrist. This is the breathing of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and now it is already in the world. And of course, the Antichristo connects it back to paragraph 7, as have several things that we've been looking at in this paragraph, recalling paragraph 7 and those who went out from them, the Antichristoi who went out from them before. But it sounds like there is something in the world, right? This idea that there's something moving in the world, and that gets most clearly stated. You are from God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he who is in you. Greater is the in you one than the in the world one, right? And with all of the language we've had about God abiding in us and the Father and the Son abiding in us and all of that stuff, it sounds like there is something else, right? Someone else abiding in the world in the same kind of way. And he's spoken more directly, of the accuser and of the evil one at various other points. But I wanted to just go back for a second and look at the way that concept has been kind of lying beneath, to some extent, has been kind of lurking. This idea of the power, the evil power that is abiding in the world. He does not present it. Again, I want to, both things that I was just talking about, both the fact that he points to it and the fact that he tends to point to it very indirectly, I think both important. The fact that it's there is important because he does acknowledge that there is a power in the world. There is a spiritual force in the world. He acknowledges the existence of an enemy. And yet, he doesn't make that the focal point. He doesn't, for as much as John really loves the kind of evenly balanced statements that he so often makes, the way that he likes to counterbalance things, he has not presented this as like there's God on the one hand and the devil on the other hand, as if they were in some sense sort of equally balanced or whatever. It's never been that. And he establishes that through the indirection. The first place I would just, so kind of glancing back through the epistle, the first place I would point to is his initial metaphor of light and darkness. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. notice the way that here he presents, we've got darkness and light, these two opposing ideas, and yet he doesn't put them as two opposing things. God is light, 100% light. There is no darkness in him at all. Darkness is, right? In saying this, he acknowledges the existence of darkness. He doesn't acknowledge that there is he's not talking about it as if the darkness is active or personal or anything like that. He goes on to talk about walking in darkness. We have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness. We lie and do not practice the truth. He associates walking in the darkness with going astray, losing your way, right? He doesn't introduce the darkness at the beginning as this sort of active force. His focus is on God and on the light. And when you are outside of God, when you're outside of the light, then you're in darkness, right? We get that same language when he talks about up here in chapter 2, verse 8. On the other hand, I'm writing a new commandment to you, which is true in him and in you, because the darkness is passing away and the true light is already shining. We just went back to this verse when we were thinking about the word already, right? Remember, that's the same word. We're going to get that the next time we're going to get that word already is the spirit of Antichrist, which already is in the world, right? The true light is already shining as well. Both of those things are operative, right? We have the spirit of Antichrist, the breathing of Antichrist out in the world, and we have the true light already shining. And the darkness is passing away. This paragraph, like in this paragraph, we have the walking in the light stuff, right? The one who says he is in the light. So this is used as almost like a kind of a synonym for walking with God, right? We got walking with God before, and now we get walking in the light, right? And so you're in the light or you're in the darkness, and you might think you're abiding in the light. Or the one who loves his brother abides in the light, but the one who hates his brother is in the darkness and walks in the darkness and does not know where he's going because the darkness has blinded his eyes. Those two, the interesting thing about this paragraph and its characterization of the darkness is, for the first time, we see the darkness doing something, right? The darkness not being simply passive, not being merely the absence of light, because the darkness is leaving. The verb passing away, remember, is it's like it's leaving, it's going out, right? It's actively doing something there that is leaving, right? And there at the end, the darkness is the subject of the verb too. The darkness has blinded his eyes. That's why he wanders astray. So notice how with the not knowing where you're going, it connects back to the walking in darkness and losing your way from paragraph 2. Right. But up here in paragraph 4, now there's this sense of the darkness acting on you, right? The darkness blinding your eyes when you walk out into it. So both references to the darkness in this paragraph suggest that it's, again, not just negative in a logical sense, that it's not just an absence of light, but that it does things. It can do things to you, but of course, something's also being done to it, right? It's also leaving, right? Now, of course, we get in the poem is when we first get the first references to a person, to the evil one, the Panero. The evil one, of course, which is being overcome, which, of course, we were prepared for with the idea of that, the darkness passing away, right? The darkness is passing away. You have overcome the evil one. The juxtaposition between those two things, right, suggests a connection. That when he's talking about the darkness and the darkness passing away, that he is also pointing to at the same time the evil one, which of course then in the classic John way makes us go back and reread paragraph 2 and be like, oh, this sounds different now. So now walking in darkness sounds sounds different than it did before. Now that he's prompted us through that juxtaposition of paragraph 4 and 5 in the poem, prompts us to think about the darkness in connection with the evil one. Okay. So anyway, let's keep going. Then that's when we get the world stuff for the first time. He transitions from there into the world things. And the world gets connected through the pattern of his language to the darkness as well, through that final verse. The world is passing away and its desires. That is, the world is doing the same thing that the darkness is. He's put the darkness and the world in parallel, just as the darkness is passing away because the true light is already shining. So the world is passing away. And he compares it to the living, to abiding to the age, right at the very end of the paragraph. The one who does the will of God will abide to the age. This sense of like, that's when the passing away of the world and of the darkness is going to be complete, right? When the age comes, the messianic age comes. And it's almost here. We are on the cusp of it, right? Have been on the cusp of it. Yes. Okay. So he connects the idea of the world with the darkness, and right in between the two of those things, we have that connection with the evil one. So he doesn't talk about the evil one here; he's just talking about the world. But this first real, and we went back and we looked at this paragraph last time when we were thinking about the cosmos. This is the time when he's connecting, setting the cosmos in opposition to God, to the Father. And at the same time that he does that, he's putting it in parallel with the darkness, which he's begun to increasingly sort of personify, right? Now, interestingly, when we get the paragraph about the Antichrist, we don't get language about the darkness, or references to the world either, right? Here he is establishing the concepts of Antichristo, the anti-anointed one, the anti-anointed ones, this idea of the anointing from the Holy One that we have, and the anti-anointing, apparently, that the others have, and the anti-anointed one, singular, Antichrist, singular. The Antichristo is coming, and we know that it is the last hour. Again, they're picking up on that same idea of the imminence of the age, right? The coming age, the coming messianic age. So, but again, he doesn't lean into the world or the evil one or talk about darkness here. He's establishing Antichrist, the anti-anointed one, and the anointing from the Holy One that we have. And of course, also this confessing of the Son and the Father abiding in us. Now, in paragraph 8, remember we had this is one of the first times we were looking at those moments. It's the first of a couple of these kinds of moments where he's talking about something, and then he does this little side note, right? In the middle of one of the most, it's like a rhetorical climax. See what kind of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called the children of God, and such we are, right? That sentence is a real rhetorical high moment in the epistle. And then he segues from there immediately to something which is related but tangential, and not tangentially connected to what he's discussing in this paragraph. This paragraph is all about that future hope, right? What will happen when we are in God's parousia, in God's presence, and the mystery, right? It has not appeared yet it has not been revealed yet what we will be, but we know that when he is revealed, we will be like him, because we will see him just as he is, right? So, but in the middle of all of that talk about, he notes, he makes this tangential remark about us and our relationship with the world, For this reason, the world does not know us, because it did not know him. And remember that the knowledge word that's used there, here at the very beginning of chapter 3, in paragraph 8, is the gnosko word. Does not come to know, or has not like established a relationship, has not come to be familiar with us personally. For this reason, the world has not come to know us, because it did not come to know him. So again, it's not that it's irrelevant, but it's this sort of side note. Once again, reinforcing this idea of the world's opposition to God. The world didn't come to know God. The world which is passing away, like the darkness is passing away, because the light is coming and there's no darkness in God. No darkness can remain when the light comes, right? But the world didn't know him. Then in paragraph 9, the big sin paragraph that we talked about for a long time, this is when we get finally his overt reference to the Diabolo, to the accuser, right? The Satan in Hebrew. This is an important moment. He's sort of, I say named, though neither Diabolo nor the Satan is a name exactly. It's a title. It's like a job description. But it does seem clear that the evil one that he alluded to only one time so far in the entire epistle to this point, back in that poem, that is kind of coming out into the open here. The one who does righteousness, the doing righteousness one is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who does sin is of the accuser, for the accuser has sinned from aparkes, from the beginning. He identifies here the diabolos, the accuser, the evil one, as the one who is, he doesn't exactly say that he is the origin of sin, but he is the one who's been, if you've got the one who does righteousness and the one who does sin, right? That's the pairing that he's doing. The devil's been one of the doing sin ones, aparkes, from the beginning, right? He's if not the source, he's the trailblazer, right? When it comes to doing sin. No one who is born of God does sin, because his seed, God's seed, abides in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. By this, the children of God and the children of the accuser are revealed, are made manifest. One of John's favorite words. Anyone who does not do righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. Where is Satan named the father of lies? Gospel of John. For he's a liar and the father of it. Quoting the King James there off the top of my head. John hasn't used that exact language, so it's really tempting to go there, because of course the idea of the accuser, the Diabolo, being the father, right, of something is like, seems in line, right? Seems very on brand for what John is saying, especially with thinking about the way that the father was opposed to the world and everything, right? And the world is connected with the Diabolo, but I don't want to import it necessarily, because he hasn't gone there yet in the epistle. But I suspect I'd have to look at that passage in John. I'd have to spend a little time maybe with the Greek there to try to see what John's doing in that passage in the gospel. But the way that he thinks and works in the epistle anyway, I would expect that if he were calling, that he would call the accuser the father of something like lies, if he were wanting to, if he would be opposing that directly to God being the father of, of something else, truth, presumably, if he were pairing those things. But yeah. And I agree. Yeah, Randall says that Diabolos has the sense of a false accuser or slanderer, so the connection with lying is kind of built in. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm certainly not at all resisting that connection between the Diabolos and lie. I don't want to, the stuff from the Gospel of John is like secondary data. It's not primary data in trying to understand this. So I'm trying to focus primarily first on the epistle stuff. In fact, like usually how I would like to do it is complete the study of the epistle, get a real hand on what he's saying and how he's saying it in this epistle, and then go back and compare that, like those overall patterns to the overall patterns in the Gospel of John. That's the problem with going like, again, it's so hard to resist at times because you'll find things like this that are really relevant, but it's why you always have to be careful, like verse hunting and stuff, or like when connections like this come to you. Like the connections are often really important and valuable. But anyway, so okay. So as I say, so this is where we get the diabolos. This is where we get the accuser, the slanderer, the false accuser, as Randall reminds us. Explicitly, the works of the diabolos explicitly in opposition to the works of God, or rather, the works of God coming, as he says, the Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the diabolos, of the accuser, right? Jesus came in order to, the Son of God was revealed in order to pull apart the deeds, the works, the ergo of the diabolos. But he also has at the same time makes the really important connection. The thing, remember, which was he's now making more clear that which was only implied way back in paragraph 4. Remember the stuff about the light and the darkness? Like if you walk in the light or you walk in the darkness, you can say you're in the light, but if you hate your brother, you've been in the darkness, right? And we were talking about how in that paragraph, the darkness was beginning to sound active, but it was only by implication. Well, now it's much clearer, right? Now he's just like straight up child of the accuser, right? By this, the children of God and the children of the accuser are obvious. And that distinction clearly maps back onto those who are in the light and those who are in the darkness from paragraph 4, those who love their brother and those who hate their brother. As of course, he's going to go on and segue to very strongly in the next paragraph, right? Cain was of the evil one. So he provides us Cain and the whole, this whole sort of, not digression into, segue into a discussion, this raising of the Cain and Abel story as the paradigm for loving or hating your brother, right? And explicitly rooting that to being a child of the accuser, a child of the evil one. The same Panero, the same evil one, which was being overcome back in the poem, and that very first reference to this, to the evil force, right? To the evil one, the accuser, the diabolo, who has been sinning aparches from the beginning, and whose works clearly involve destroying people, slaughtering people, butchering people, being a person killer, right? And all those words that he uses here in this paragraph. Hating his brother or sister is a person killer in verse 15. Okay, so we don't, in paragraph 11 here, we don't get anything about that here. This is where he's segueing to talking about the commandments and our appearing before God again. But after the introduction of the Spirit at the end is what brings us back to paragraph 12. So we've had these things established by now. So even like and now it is already in the world, we have a lot to build on, right? We should be thinking about the Antichrist and the end, the last hour being upon us, right? Already, we should be thinking about the darkness passing away and the true light already shining, right? So yes, the spirit of Antichrist is already in the world. Greater is he who is in you. Greater is the in you one than the in the world one. This reference in verse 4 to the in the world one is again now another even more explicit. He paralleled the world and the darkness before, with the evil one, that reference to the evil one kind of sandwiched in the middle, right? And now here, more explicitly, we have this idea of something else, right? Something that is not of God. Just like that doing righteousness and doing sin opposition, and the diabolo, the accuser, sinning aparches, right? Being one of those people who does sin aparches. Something else is in the world. And animating in it. So we've got this whole thing, the false prophets going out into the world, and the world listening to them, and the spirit of Antichrist being out there in the world, and the evil one abiding in the world. I wanted to go back and review that stuff because it's important. I know it may seem, perhaps, especially the discussion about the word spirit that I've been having through here, and my pretty strong conviction now that his use of the word spirit here is not the way that we hear the word spirit in English now. That he's not talking about believing spirits and testing spirits in the modern English sense, but that he's talking about words, that he's talking about breathings, that he's talking about the messages. Don't believe everything you hear, but test the things that you hear, is, I think, like the things that people say, the breathings that come from people. I'm convinced that even when he says, by this you know the Spirit of God, he means what God is breathing out. Every spirit, every breathing, every speech that confesses, that homologons, that says the same. The word confess has that speech concept implicit in it, and he uses it, pairs it with spirit both times there in verse 2 and verse 3. And then, of course, we come back to verse 5. Greater is he that is in you than he who is in the world. They, the false prophets, are from the world. Therefore, they speak. Their speaking is from the world. And the world hears them. It's all about the speaking and the hearing. This paragraph is entirely focused on speaking and hearing. So I think that that's important. And I've been emphasizing that to some extent, instead of talking about the activity of the evil one going on here. I wanted to make 100% clear, I think John is absolutely implying the activity of the evil one here. And that even when he is talking about even the spirits, even the breathings that he's discussing, like, could there be what we in modern English would call, especially modern Christian English, would call spiritual activity involved in that? 100%. Absolutely could be, right? I just think that it's important to recognize that the tendency in modern interpretation of this paragraph, which thinks that this whole paragraph is just talking about demons, is, I think, misunderstanding things in an important way. But I'm not at all resistant to the idea that because I think he is clearly suggesting that the evil one is very much at work here. And I think verse 4 is a very clear statement of that. When he says, you have overcome them, the false prophets. You have overcome the false prophets because you are from God, and greater is he who is abiding in you than he who is abiding in the world. The evil one abides in the world, and therefore in the false prophets as well. But God is greater than the evil one, and therefore the anointing that we have from the Holy One is greater than the anti-anointing, right? We have Christ, the anointed one, abiding in us, and that is stronger than the anti-anointing that abides, that is in those who are in the world, those who are of the world, and have gone out into the world. So, Stephen, yeah, we talked a little bit last time about that. It's really interesting how we have the relationship between the false prophets and the world is characterized with two opposite prepositions in this paragraph. We start with them going into the world, eis, the world, right? Into the movement, which is the opposite of ex, right? But then they're also extocosmo, right? They're also of the world. like in their natures. They're derived from the world and they're going out into the world. So of course the world listens to them because they are ex to cosmo in verse 5. Let's go back to our Greek here. They are ek to cosmo. Because of this, they speak ek to cosmo. And hokosmos and the world, ekouai auton, listens to them, hears them. The world hears them. I'm resistant. I'm sure it's right. I'm resistant to using the word listens here. The reason I'm resistant to it is, I said this last time, I love the English distinction in meaning between hear and listen. Like that distinction seems to me a really important one. But linguistically, it's not there. It doesn't seem to be there in Greek. That is, they use the same word. And sometimes because of its emphasis, it seems to mean listen. And sometimes it just means hear. Like just simply to have like the sound waves reach your ears. And I don't see, maybe there is one that I don't know of, but I don't see ways in which that, like, you can definitely tell, oh, they totally mean listen instead of hear. So our word here can mean that. I mean, we'll still say things like, hear me when I say this, right? So I would just pronounce it. I would just translate it here, because then you still have the opportunity to understand it in the sense of listen. But to translate it as listen means like you're making a choice. Like you're being like, it's 100% definite means the listen sense. And it makes me uncomfortable, just because it doesn't seem to me 100% certain that that's what he means there. And it limits the meaning. And I in translating, I'm all about not making choices unless I have to. You always have to, but well, no, like there are always choices to be made, but you actually don't have to every single time. Yeah. Okay. And the world hears them. So now let's go on. Okay, let's read the English first. We are from God. The one who knows God listens to us. The one who is not from God does not listen to us. Okay, so we think that's probably the same verb, right? Probably. He's using that same akue verb. So it's probably the one who knows. Hang on a second. I'm covering it up because I want to make some guesses. The one who knows God. It's probably going to be, he's probably going to use a participial phrase there, right? The knowing God one. The knowing God one hears us. The not from God one. That's really interesting. The not ek to theo one does not hear us. By this, en tuto, we gnosko, the spirit of truth, the spirit of aletheia, and the spirit of error. I don't know what the word for error is because I don't think it's the same as the word for lying, which I'm prepared to be very interested in a minute. Okay, let's look at the Greek now. We ek to theo esmen. Absolutely. We are ek to theo. Ek to theo, one of like John's favorite phrases, right? We are from God. Excellent. NASB nails it with the from God, unlike the interlinear, but it's fine. At least it doesn't say in. Okay. We are from God. The knowing God one. Nailed it. Yes. Excellent. Okay. The gnoskon ton theon. Hol gnoskon ton theon. The knowing God one. Akue hemon. All right. Look at this. See, isn't this fun? Like, this is like the reward for studying so carefully, like to really begin to get a sense for like how John talks in the words that he uses. When you can like recreate it. Like when you can um, when you can anticipate it like that, the Greek from the English, then you're following along. It's good. Okay. Um, listens to us. Okay. All right, now here we go. So I say I thought this was weird, right? Remember, I was stumbling over that. The one who is not from God does not listen to us. Okay, here we get a pronoun. Yeah, hos uk. So the one uk not, no, uk estin ektutheo. He who is not. So hang on. Estin. So he's not. Is he just not using a participle because he's using a linking verb? Because it's easy to do. You can't really do the present participle thing with a linking verb. I mean, he's not going to be like the not being from God one, right? I mean, like that'd be weird, right? Um, okay, so the difference, so hos and ho look similar, but they're actually quite different because ho is just an article. That's just the, right? But this is a pronoun. This is a pronoun. Um, so this is more would be more literally the one, which sounds the same because when we render it in English, like we can't do this in English because in Greek he's just doing a definite article with nothing. And like in English, that's against the law. Like you can't ever just hang a definite article out to dry like they seem to do in Greek constantly, right? So you can't just literally translate that into English because our language doesn't work that way. So we substitute the relative pronoun one, but that's still an extrapolation in order to make it a functioning grammatical sentence in English. It's literally the knowing God, the knowing the God, literally, like word for word, literally. The knowing the God listens to us, but clearly with the implication the knowing God one. Um, right. So it literally would be again in English, even the interlinear is saying he who, but again, it's not he exactly. It's just who, right? This is Hos means who, right? Yes, Hos means who, not the interrogative who, but the relative who. Yeah, just like um, just like we would say the one who was knocking at the door, right? It's that same who there. Um, who is not from God does not listen to us. So what that means, so let me tentatively draw a conclusion or point to an effect about the lack of parallelism in these two sentences. Because we've seen him carefully balance and put sentences like this in parallel lots of times before, right? The knowing God one listens to us. The not knowing God one, or like the ignoring God one, all right, sorry, the knowing or like the not knowing God, right? The ignorant of God one or whatever, the ignoring God one. Um, he could parallel it that way, but he doesn't make it exactly parallel. And the difference between having the article here and the relative pronoun here is that the emphasis falls instead on the verb, the action verb that he's included, which there's no action verb in the second one. In other words, we're pairing the person who does something, like the identity of the subject of that first sentence is entirely in the action that they perform. The knowing God, the one who knows God listens to us. It's all about the knowing God. That defines the subject of that sentence. It's not the verb, it's not an action that defines the subject of the second verb, of the second sentence, rather. He who is not from God. What he puts at the center. So, in other words, the word gnoskon, knowing, is the heart of the subject matter of that first sentence. The thing that you do, knowing God. The heart of the second sentence is the phrase ektutheu. In this case, uk ektutheu, not from God. So you've got the knowing God one on the one side and the not from God one on the other side. And so one of the things that he does when he parallels things, that he creates these really balanced statements that sort of teach us to how the two things correspond directly to each other. By deviating from that here, he accomplishes something else, which is making like an even more complicated set of compare, because the two things that he's weighing against each other are knowing God on the one hand and not being from God on the other hand. And you see what he accomplishes by that? He accomplishes by that an implication of, well, of course, what is balanced with not from God? It's like a logic puzzle, right? If A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then C is equal to A, right? Okay, so if knowing God is on the opposite, is not equal to being from God, then being from God and knowing God are parallel terms. Then they're on the same side of the equation, right? Just as being from God and not being from God are opposites of each other. Now, since knowing God and not being from God are also opposites of each other, therefore, like, then A equals C. Knowing God and being from God are associated with each other, right? So he's one effect of this is to lay some weight on this new, at least locally new term. He's not talked about gnoskoing anything for several paragraphs now. It's a familiar word, which we were first introduced to way back in paragraph 3. We'll review that in a second. But he's not done it for a while, right? That's not been what he's emphasizing for a while. He's not talked about our knowing God. In fact, when was the last time he used it? Can somebody look it up? When was the last time he used gnoskon? A gnosko variant. Was it back? I know he used it in that passage we just looked at in paragraph 8 when he said the world doesn't know us because it didn't know God. That's gnosko there, which was setting us up for this. Did he have any uses of it in between? Did we get gnosko in paragraphs 9, 10, or 11? I don't think so. I don't remember any off the top of my head. But in any case, so you see how he does that. Okay, we got it in 320. Hang on. Right. Knows all things. God knows all things. God is greater than our heart. And gnosko panta. Right. Yeah, he knows everything. Gotcha. Thank you. So we did get a reminder of it. Oh, and that's fact because it's God knowing there. Yes. Assuring our heart. Yeah, right. And we know by this, we gnosko right at the end. Okay, so we did get it twice there in the previous paragraph. There, okay, there's me forgetting about that. We gnosko because of this, that he abides in us. We know in this, right? That's the one I objected to with him. We know in this that he abides in us. It's the in joke. By the Spirit he has given, whom he is, by the breath that he has given us. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And I see Stephen is foreboding we're going to get a bunch of where it's gonna be coming up several times here. So in fact, thanks to Stephen's research here, who tells me, so this is 4:6 is the verse we're talking about today. Gnosko is going to come up in the next 2 verses as well, the first 2 verses of the next paragraph, which tells me that he's bringing this up now. The idea of knowledge here, knowing God, to sort of catapult us into that. It's a sort of a transitional thing as he's going to come back to that. Okay. So the knowing God being set in parallel to not being ekstutheo, not being from God. Yeah. Notice in verse 24, um, I can go all the way back down to the end of that chapter and the end of that paragraph. Um, by this we know, in this we know that he abides in us. So this is not about gnoskoing God. Exactly. It's about knowing that he abides in us, which of course was the context in which gnosko, well, one of the contexts in which gnosko was brought up in the first place. How do we know? Oops, hang on. Going the wrong way. Going the wrong way. Okay. There we go. By this we know, gnosko, that we have come to know him. Gnosko. Right? So it was how he first brought it up. When we first hear this word, it's about our knowledge of God. How have we come to know that we have come to know God? By keeping his commandments. That's how. By this we gnosko, that we are in him. So I get two of the three usages in this, in that paragraph are about our knowledge of our relationship with God, which is also characterized as knowledge, right? We know God. We have come to know God. And we can know that we have come to know it. And that's how he's using it here at the end of paragraph 11. In this, we know that he abides in us. Because we know him. We are knowing God ones. Which, again, he is putting in parallel with being ektutheu, being from God. That's how we know him, because we're from him. These kinds of like reciprocal relationships. John's all over that. Anyway, the one who is not, who is not from God does not akue hemon, does not listen to us. Same verb. Ek tutu. Ooh, interesting. I got that one wrong. I said en tutu. I thought it would be in this, but it's not. It's from this. He's going back to ek again. In this gnoskomen, in this we know. Yeah. Okay, hang on. Let's get back up here. In this, and from this we know. The spirit of truth and the spirit of error. From the question of who hears us. The knowing God one hears us. The one who does not know God does not hear us. From this, we know. We have come to know. This is how we gain this knowledge, this familiarity with the pneuma, the breathing of truth, and the breathing of falsehood. And that's really interesting. Because what it implies. How do you know the spirit of truth and the spirit of planes? You know based on who listens to them. If the world listens to them, that is those who are not ektutheu, on account of their ektupanero instead, or even ektukosmo, which is what he said in this paragraph. And if they're ektukosmo, then of course they're not ektupatris, as we learned back in paragraph 6, right? So yeah, if the world listens to it, then it's the spirit of falsehood, of planes. If those who are ek to theou, those who are the knowing God ones, listen, then it's the spirit of truth. The thing is that I find a little bit trippy about this last sentence is he seems to shift his grounds all of a sudden. That is, he's talking about our speaking. He's not talking about our speaking at any point. This paragraph has not been about our speaking. It's been about the speaking of the false prophets. This has all been about hearing. This is a speaking and hearing paragraph, but we've been on the receiving end the whole time. I mean, like everybody's been on the receiving end, but the people doing the talking here, the people doing the breathing, have been almost exclusively the false prophets and like the breathing of Antichrist. Right? And the world hears them because the world hears them because they speak from the world, because they are from the world. But now all of a sudden, in verse 6, he's talking about us speaking, though he doesn't use that word. He doesn't use the verb for us. He doesn't talk about us speaking. He just talks about them listening to us, but we haven't been talking. That's the thing that I'm finding a little like unsettling. That's the sudden shift I'm talking about. We haven't said a thing in this whole paragraph. Well, no, that's not quite true. In verse 2, the Spirit of God, the breathing of God. Every spirit that homologons, that Jesus, the Messiah, has come in the flesh is ek to theou. So there's a breathing that's ek to theou. Verse 2 describes the good breathing, the good spirit, the one that's ek to theou, the breathing of God. So I guess this idea of the two competing speakings is introduced here in verses 2 and 3. Right? We get the Spirit of God, the good speaking, the good breathing, and then we get the spirit of Antichrist, the spirit that does not come from God. Yeah. So we've been implicitly speaking the whole time. So the other reason that this kind of messes with me a little bit is that a lot of this paragraph sounds like it's a 2-body problem, but it's apparently a 3-body problem. That is, by 2-body problem, I meant like it's us and the Antichrist. It's us and the false prophets, right? Those Antichristoi, the anti-anointed ones. It's like anointed one versus anti-anointed one. And the thing is, they're saying things and we're supposed to not listen. That's why he says we got to test the spirits, right? So it sounds like it's us and them, with them trying to say things, them breathing things towards us that we're supposed to be careful of. Don't believe them all. Test those breathings, right? That's the initial message. And that seems to be what he's picking up on then in verse 4 when he says, you've overcome them, which means they haven't overcome you, right? They're trying to overcome you with their speaking, but you overcome them instead. Because greater is he who abides in you than he who abides in the world. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's where I'm missing it, is that the verse 1, the established concept in verse 1 of like us versus the false prophets, or rather the false prophets coming after us. Maybe that kind of locked me into a mode, and that's not the mode where he's actually staying locked. Because he immediately goes to, there's the good breathing and then there's the bad breathing. And in verse 4, you are from God and you have overcome them because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. It's explicitly, it's still clearly talking about the two breathings in competition with each other. and our breathing is going to win. We're going to overcome them. Our breathings are going to overcome their breathings. The Spirit of God is going to overcome the spirit not from God. That's why we're using the victory word, overcoming, there, right? Yeah. And then Randall says, then in verse 5, the speaking and the hearing are explicitly connected. They speak and the world listens, the world hears. And Randall says, so in verse 6, where only the hearing is mentioned, the speaking, therefore, is sort of implied. But yeah, exactly. The we in verse 6, the us in verse 6, have been implicitly speaking, I think, since verse 2. Interesting that that's not front and center, because it's not front and center, right? Like, let me see what I mean by that. If he'd wanted to make that front and center, right? Like verse 1 could have been, so keep in mind that if you're ektutheo, your job is to speak the truth, right? Like you have to do truth speaking. That's your job. Go forth and speak the truth since you are ektutheo. But, at the same time, keep in mind, there's going to be folks out there, false prophets, right? Who are themselves speaking stuff that's going to sound kind of like what you're saying, but it's going to be different. And you need to test the differences. Let's go to the tape, right? Okay, he could have gone there, but he doesn't go there. He doesn't lay that out there at the beginning. Maybe it's something he takes for granted. But yeah. But I think verse 2, 3, and 4, yeah, it's the beginning, it's the first verse that kind of puts me down, well, I won't say the wrong path, but draws my attention to that one element, the false prophets coming after us and us having to guard ourselves against the false prophets, rather than us being in kind of competition with them. Not against, and that, I think, helps us to understand the victory word, right? Nine kikate, or however exactly it is. The Nike word, the victory word, we have overcome them. It doesn't just mean we have beaten them, as if we're defeating them in battle. Exactly. But we've outscored them, essentially. So, sorry, my 3-body problem, I apologize. I mean, 2 speakers in one audience, essentially. I thought it was the two, the false prophets and us, and that the speaking was all directed towards us, and we had to guard against it. That's what I mean. So the verse 1 seems to introduce a head-to-head, false prophets are coming after you, be on the lookout for them, right? But it turns out both the false prophets and we are speaking, and we're all speaking to an audience. There's the hearers, the potential hearers out there. I guess technically you could say it's a 4-body problem because there are 2 groups of hearers too. It turns out one who will hear the one and the one who will hear the other. But that's what I was imagining this as, you have to defend yourself against someone who is attacking you, versus you are both out there speaking to the audience, and that's where the kind of competition is. The world, the cosmos. Yeah, exactly. The hearers of the 3rd body. That's exactly what I meant when I was saying that. Now, Scott, you had asked a question before that I missed. Thinking back to verse 5, you say they speak us from the world. Does that just imply that we speak otherwise? Well, yeah, because remember, we know what the opposite of ektucosmo is, right? Ektutheo, clearly from within the context of this paragraph, right? So they are ektucosmo, and they speak ektucosmo. We are ectutheo, right? He just said that explicitly. No, he's about to say that explicitly again, right? We are ectutheo. Hemes ectutheu esmen. We are ectutheu, right? They are of the world. We are of God. Well, they are ectu cosmo. We are ectutheu. They speak ectu cosmo. We speak ectutheu, right? That's the thing he doesn't say. He implies that, right? I would have kind of loved it if in verse 6 there he would have said, Humes ectutheo esmen kai, let's see, if I can construct it, kai ectu theu lalusin. Or not, lalusin is third person, but make that first person plural, right? And there we go, right? Like, I would have loved that if it, but he skips that step, or he implies that step. But he has plenty of momentum to support that implication, to support that, not saying it out loud, because he has, in fact, been saying it. By this, you know, the Spirit of God, every spirit that the breathings that are confessing Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, that is presumably us, right? And we are overcoming them because greater is he than is us than he who is in the world. They're in the world. We are from God. They speak of the world. They speak from the world. We speak from God. The one who knows God, the knowing God ones listen, hear us. The ones who are not ectutheu do not hear us. Notice again how he has done that same, again, that back to the lack of parallel, the lack of exact parallel between those two sentences, right? Notice it mirrors verses 2 and 3. Instead of saying every spirit that homologon that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit who does not homologon that Jesus come is from the evil one, right? Instead of balancing it, he just says not. And he does the same thing at the bottom. He doesn't say the knowing God listens to us, the not knowing God one listens to them. He could say that, right? But he doesn't. He just says what matters at the end of the day is the ones who listen to us and the ones who don't listen to us. Right? He already said the world listens to them in the previous sentence. And those are presumably the ones who do not hear us, are presumably the ones who do, are presumably the world who hears them, the false prophets. Okay. From this, ek tuto, we know the breathing of truth and the breathing of error. Let me stop putting it off. Planes. Let's do planes. Error, delusion, wandering. I knew it. That's where I recognize that word from. That's the losing your way word, isn't it? Where do we go? All the way back. Paragraph 2. Paragraph 2. Okay. All right. Hang on. Yes. If we say that we have sin, we are deceiving ourselves. Right? Hang on. Go back. Boop. Back. John 1:8. If we say that sin, we don't have sin. We planomen. Boom. Got it. Yes. Planeo. So that's just the verb form of that noun, right? Planes is the noun. This is the verb. Okay. And right, it's that sense of wandering, leaving the path, right? Being led astray. I remember we talked about that. When we said we deceive ourselves, literally we lead ourselves astray. Yes. And Didn't we get it? Where did we get it? Verse or paragraph 4? No, where was it? Where else did we get planeo? I know we did. We're leading ourselves astray somewhere else. Someone's being led astray. Where was it? Um, 9? Yes. Make sure no one deceives you, right? Oh, no, it's not. Wait, 226? I missed it in 226. Oh, right, right. Same thing. These things I have written to you concerning those who are trying to lead you astray. Yes, who are trying to planeo you. Yes. Is that it in 3:7 as well? Make sure no one leads you astray. Yeah. Okay. It's that one too. Okay. So twice we have the people who are trying to planeo, who are trying to lead us astray. We're trying to make us wander off the path. Okay. Make sure no one deceives you. That's kind of sounds like just in general, right? But then this is more specific. These things I have written to you concerning those who are trying to planeo you, to lead you astray. And when we say we don't have sin, we lead ourselves astray. Way back at the beginning. Okay, okay. Great. Planes. That's where we are. We know the spirit of truth and the spirit of wandering. Huh. Planes. It's a That's a verb that requires an object, right? At least all 3 times it's been used. It has a direct object, either the reflexive one, we're doing it to ourselves, or other people are doing it to you. So error is such an innocent sounding word by comparison. See what I mean? Like error, could be a mistake. Like, oh, errors were made. Errors can just happen. It's possible for errors to be a victimless crime, you know what I mean? But planeo, I don't think can be a victimless crime. It doesn't just happen. It happens to something. Right? Or can you just wander? But no, even when we were leading ourselves astray, and when we were the ones wandering off, it was something we were doing to ourselves. Hang on, I want to go back to that now. Where were we? Let's do it in. Am I still in one? Yeah, I am. Looking at it right here. Okay, planeo. To lead astray, deceive, or cause to wander. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Can it be you like is it in an intrans so a transitive verb means one that requires an object, and an intransitive verb is one that doesn't have an object, right? Some verbs can be used in either way. Like here. This looks like they're just going astray. But now tell me, um, so Randall or Susan or one of you other brilliant people, can you tell me if planethe here is that passive? Like does the Greek here literally say and one has been led astray? Aha, it is. I thought so. Yes, be led astray. Yeah, exactly. So it's not actually intransitive, even when it's being used. Like we are the verb that we would use, like to go astray, that's an intransitive verb. You don't go something astray, right? You can lead it astray, right? But go is an intransitive verb in English. That's why we use it there, right? Because it's an intransitive sense. but not in Greek. No, this is a this verb is transitive all day long. Yeah, because they put it in the passive or even in the middle. Yeah, here's the middle voice. Said to them, "You are mistaken." Yes, interesting, interesting. Okay. Um, Randall says he sees a couple examples in classical Greek of an intransitive usage. Okay. Yeah, middle, which is right, transitive reflecting back on itself would also work. Yeah, yeah, yep. To lead oneself astray. And is that indeed our usage here? Nah, it's active here, but anyway. Okay, awesome. All right. So I'm going to say functionally, the way that they use this in New Testament Greek certainly seems to be a dedicatedly transitive verb. The idea of planeo is to deceive someone, possibly yourself, but somebody. It's a it's a it's a crime that always has a victim, even if it's you. Which brings me back to the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Planes, spirit of error, the noun form. Which one comes from which? Like, which is the chicken and which is the egg here? Do we know? Ooh, one gets used once as a noun in all the Gospels. The verb is derived from the noun. Okay. Okay. So if the verb is derived from the noun, I see. The second A in planeo shows that it's derived from the feminine noun. Okay. Great. Great. Okay. Right. Planeo. Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, okay. Wow. Paul uses it several times. Right. If you save a sinner from error in James, and then we get it this once in John. Wow. Okay. Well, this is a surprisingly unpopular word in the New Testament. Um, which is interesting. Remember when I was remember when we were talking about verse 5 and I was kind of making a big sorry, I'm trying to highlight something and I just advanced the slide instead. Um, I was kind of making a big deal last time of the fact that the verbs used in verse 5 um they lalusin from the world from the ect to cosmo and the world acue them. And I was making a big deal of the fact. Remember, we went back and we did a little word search on those. Did a little uh, did did a little work on those, um, and found that those were the super generic verbs. Remember, I was emphasizing that, like that, and there were a couple um, reasons I found that interesting. One is that it's not a specific. There's no specific emphasis. It's just super generic. They talk, they hear. Um, here at the end, planes is an unusual word. There are obviously much more common words for things like, so like I bet you the word lie. Where did we last get lie? or liar. Um, where, where, where do we else get lies? Um, oh, we got truth in verse 18. We haven't been lying in a while, have we? Huh. Well, I know we got it back at the beginning. Let's go aparques then. 227, we got it. It's been a while. So way back to paragraph 7. Anyway, I'm looking at paragraph 2 here because I know we got it there. Um, if we say we have no sin, we're we're leading ourselves astray. We're planeoing ourselves because he parallels them here. We make him a liar, and the truth is not in us. Okay. And then right up in paragraph 27, right? The only you have received from abides in you have no need anyone to teach you, but as his anointing teaches you about all things, and is true and is not a lie, and just as it is taught you, you abide in him. Okay. Um, right, no lie is of the truth, verse 21. Let's go. Let's just look here. The point that I'm making, let me tell you in advance what I'm building towards here. He says the spirit of truth and the spirit of something else. He's again balancing two things. What I'm suspecting, just by looking up planes and seeing how unusual that word is, I am suspecting that this is that John is pulling out something unexpected on us. Like it's one of those things where if he started it and didn't finish it and left us to finish it for him, we'd do it wrong. Right? It's like an expectation and fulfillment thing. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of fill in the blank, and we'd all be like, lies, pseudos, right? Yeah. Um, but it's not pseudos. It's the spirit of planes. He's not giving us the word that we would normally expect, the default word. And because you know it, and because any psan pseudos, well, this one is pretty unusual too. We don't get this one very often either, but we got it twice in this epistle. Look at that. First John is one of the only two. Yes, two uh, books in the whole New Testament that uses the word lie twice. Revelation being the other. We get lie and liar in because this is Sharon, here's your father of lies passage, right? When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it, right? 844. You are of the father. You are of the father, the diabolu, este, kai tas epithumias, and its desires. Yeah, we know about those. To patros, to your, and you desire the desires of your father. Oh, you desire to do them. You desire to do the what of your father? You desire to do the desires of your father? Huh, that's weird. That one was a person killer in Aparches. Kai, in the truth, uk estaken, did not stood there. He didn't stand there because There is no aletheia en auto. Hotan lale. Whenever he talks lies, ekton idion, right? Oh yeah, of his own idiosyncratic thing. Yeah, he's speaking his own idiom, almost literally. I love that. Pote, because pseustes estin. He's a pseustes. What can you say? Kai ho pater otu, and the father of it. Really cool. Yes. So yes, sorry, I'm all like I'm digressing. Or as Randall says, there's an expression for digress in the dictionary: planeo apo tu logo, to wander from the message, to wander from the words. Yeah, sorry, I'm leading myself astray from the words here. Anyway, okay. So pseudos is not the more common word. So there's nothing really to choose between them when it comes to frequency. Unlike so it's not about him going back down to the bottom of six. It's not just that he's using an ungeneric word. He's not used this noun yet, whereas he has talked about lies and lying and liars, and talked about is a truth and not a lie. Right? He's paired aletheas and pseudos already a couple times in this epistle. I think planes. I think it's about the transitiveness. I think he wants the spirit of wandering. I think he's evoking that because it goes back to the false prophets. Like it's um yes, again, I agree. Randall says it's plane is less falsehood than deception. Yes. Yes. It's true. Error in Latin means to wander off. Like it's that's what the word that that's what the Latin suggests. But our English usage of error hasn't exactly maintained that metaphorical weight. Yeah, see, that's exactly the point that I'm making. Um, it's not just about falsehood, it's about deception. Someone is trying to fool you because there are these folks out there who are breathing their breathings as if their breathings are from God, but they're not from God. You can tell, like there are ways to tell, you can test their breathings. But yes, it's deception, misleading, leading astray. Misleading, actually, yeah. Or they're fooling themselves, Susan. Presumably both, right? Presumably both. They are victimizing others and also themselves. And Susan, oh, isn't that wonderful? Yes, you're right. Think about our prepositions with the false prophets, right? They go into the world, but they're from the world. They're both eis and ek, the cosmos, right? Yes, they are deceiving. They've gone into the world in order to deceive others, in order to lead others astray. But they're also from the world. They've also been led astray. Yes, exactly. They're not ek to theou. They're not from God. They're from the world. And so therefore that whole thing is, again, I think that the prepositions there with the false prophets show how circular that whole thing is, right? They've gone into the world. They speak to the world, and the world hears. Why does the world hear them? Because they speak from the world. Why do they speak from the world? Because they are from the world. That's why they went into the world, to speak to the world, right? Like it's the world and the false prophets are like a closed loop, And on the other side, we are from God, and our speaking is from God, and those who know God hear it. Sorry, and I'm just noticing, thinking back to what we were saying about the emphasis on listening, the one who knows God listens to us. Remember when we first got the word listen? Sorry, when we first got the word no, I apologize. When we first got the word no, as I said earlier tonight, paragraph 3, the one who knows God listens to us. By this we know that we have come to know him. How? If we keep his commandments. That is, if we hear him. Notice how that's implicit all the way from the beginning. The one who says, I have come to know him and does not keep his command. If you breathe one thing, but you haven't heard the commandment. And I know we talked about the verb keep there is important, used 3 times, right? Keep his commandments, does not keep his commandments, but whoever keeps his word, right? Keeping is important. Keeping is more than just hearing. But presumably you got to hear before you can keep, right? The kind of hearing we're talking about, the listening kind of hearing that we're talking about, presumably is step 1 to keeping the commandment, right? So the two are linked from the beginning. How do you know that you know him? Well, you know that you're a knowing God one. You know, one of those ek to theou people, if you keep his commandments, which you've heard. You know, aparkes is when you've heard it from. See how all this stuff, it all keeps coming back, like it's all connected. And every time we get stuff, we go back and we find like, oh man, now that earlier verse now means so much more. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about when I've talked before about like the whole meditation literature idea. How what it is that John is going for instead of clarity. This is the kind of thing that he's going for instead of clarity. Instead of clarity, what he is getting is this rich meditative learning experience that just like reinforces more and more and more and helps you to see these like deep connections and to gain from the study of it again and again and again. Yes. Yeah, Randall, exactly. The way he throws in, the way he sets up his symmetrical patterns, right? His careful balances, and then throws in the deliberate asymmetry to make us go back and think about those two things and how they fit to each other, and then how they fit to the other things that he's been doing symmetrically all the way along. Yes. We know the spirit of truth and the spirit of wandering, the spirit of deception, the spirit of leading astray. And the opposite. And here again, truth planes, truth pseudos. And that too corresponds to, again, remember back when we first got these kinds of terms. I won't do it in the Greek because it's harder to get there in the text, but we can see them now in the English. Remember verse 6 of chapter 1? If we say we have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not do the truth. Lying and doing the truth are opposed to each other, are balanced with each other. The very first time we get any discussion of this, right? If we say we have no sin, we are planeoing ourselves, and the aletheia is not in us. So first we're doing the truth, which is the same thing we get with the doing sin and doing righteousness, same construction in paragraph 9, remember, that we were looking at before? We're doing the truth, And the truth is not in us. The truth is not abiding in us when we're leading ourselves astray. If we say we have not sinned, we make him a pseustis, a liar, and his word is not in us. His word now being paralleled to truth. Yes. So we see aletheia connected to pseudos and planes implicitly, to planeo, right here, way back in paragraph 2, right? And doing the truth, keeping his word, which we're going to get in the next paragraph, the truth being in us, and his, so like we get do the truth not in us, the word is not in us, do the word, keep the word is going to come in the next paragraph, right? In the same paragraph in which he talks about the truth also not being in him again, the love of God being perfected. Anyway, the truth being in you, God being in you, the truth abiding in you, God and the Father abiding in you, the Spirit abiding in us, the breathing of God abiding in us, and the breathing of God, which is apparently, according to verse 12, coming out of us, right? Our speaking, that some are listening to and some are not. Anyway, all of these things get tied in together there. All right. The spirit of truth and the spirit of planes. I'm thinking of aletheia, though we've encountered that word a bunch. We haven't actually talked about it all that much. And might want to come back to that a little bit at the beginning next time. Anyway, it's just paired with planes and the way that with that transitive sense of it, the wandering, leading to wander, the leading astray element, the deception element of planes. Aletheia seems very, I don't know what, passive, neutral, like a state rather than an action in the way that planes is a noun that seems to point to an action. A transitive action. But maybe we'll look at aletheia a little bit more next time. But in any case, I think we actually did the whole verse. Not bad. We're a little bit over time, but not critically over time. Next time we'll take a glance back at the whole paragraph, but we've been doing a bunch of that today already, I think. So we'll do a little review, make sure that we're getting the whole shape of things, and then move on to paragraph 13, I think, next time, which would be exciting. All right. Thanks everybody for joining me. See you again next time. Bye now.